When we first introduced AMP, a large part of it was solving a technical challenge, right? Making the mobile web more performant. But as users start to use mobile devices more and consume more and more of their content on mobile, it starts to become clear that there's also an editorial challenge when publishing to mobile platforms. Users do read long-form articles on mobile, but only for so long. Malta mentioned this in the keynote, but users only read long-form articles on mobile for an average of 1 to 2 minutes for a given article. It's not very long. It can be very difficult for these users to consume this content on mobile. The long-form format makes it very difficult for users to find which sections they want to do a deeper dive on. But instead, we want all stories to be told in the best way possible for that story. And AMP stories give publishers another approach to consider. For your users, these stories provide bite-sized, rich visual content that is more easily consumable on mobile. They also allow you, as a publisher, to worry less about getting the tech just right, and instead focus on telling the story the way it's meant to be told, with the flexibility to make those stories truly captivating. And as, again, Malta mentioned, like any AMP page, these stories are just web pages, so they are available wherever web pages are, including your own properties. So today, we're excited to announce the developer preview of AMP Stories, an open format for visual storytelling on mobile. To demonstrate, here's a story by CNN using the format. As you can see, it's very visual with these full bleed images, and you can also include video assets as well. The short-form, bite-sized text is more easily consumable on mobile. And at the end of the story here, you can see that there are options for sharing and linking out for the story to sort of get that viral share. Now, as we do with many new experimental features in AMP, we have collaborated with publishers to help innovate in this space with the goal of building a stories format for rich storytelling that we're presenting you today. The resulting AMP Stories format allows you to create visually rich tap-through stories that are immersive experiences that are specifically designed for mobile and keeping users engaged. The format is well-suited for a breadth of content, from news to lifestyle, and yes, Paul, even sports, and allows the design flexibility to establish your brand and best tell the story. Additionally, the format is automatically supported on larger screen devices as well. This lets users share the story as they would any other web page and allows the recipient to open it on any device. So what makes up a story? To walk you through this, we created a fake example story of the 5 most expensive cities in the world. After the initial cover of the story, we walk through each of the 5 most expensive cities one by one, giving details on why they make the cut. And you can see them all laid out here. A story is made up of 1 or more pages, each represented by the AMP Story page tag. In our story, we have 1 cover page with the title of the story, followed by a single page for each of the 5 most expensive cities. For the sake of our example, we chose to build a very templated story, but the framework allows the design freedom to make each page stand out. At the end of the story, the system automatically appends the templated UI that we call the bookend, that I mentioned, allows you to share, but also allows you to replay the story and have outlinks to other articles or stories for the user's onward journey. This is populated with default content out of the box, but there are configuration options to augment this experience for a more robust configuration. Now, each page of the story is made up of multiple layers, stacked back to front. These layers are all composited on top of one another to create the desired visual design. So taking the example of our cover page, starting from the back again, first we have the background video. Then we have, on top of that, we have a second layer with the title of our story, the byline, and the publication date. On top of that, we chose to add a third layer with our publisher's logo. And then lastly, the system always superimposes what we call the system layer, which includes controls, progress indicator so the user knows where they are, and other UI Chrome to help orient the user within the story. Now, each layer contains HTML or AMP elements to create the desired visual effect. So in the case of our background video layer, surprise, surprise, it has a single element, which is just a video. So this just uses AMP video just like any other AMP page would. But here we also have a template equals fill attribute, which is specific to stories, which indicates that this video should indeed be full bleed. Then, as mentioned before, we can add another layer on top of that. So this layer uses template equals vertical, which indicates that the elements should be laid out sequentially along the vertical axis. And on this layer, we have only 3 elements. First, a heading for the title of our story, and then a paragraph for each of the byline and the publication date. And you can continue to create layers and stack them on top of each other for all of the layers in your design. So let's take a look at the HTML markup that makes this happen. So AMP Story is simply an extension to AMP. And so you would start the way that you start with any other AMP extension. First, import the AMP Story JavaScript. Then you add the AMP Story tag to your document, thereby making it a story. Now, as I mentioned before, for each page in your story, you can have an AMP Story page tag. Each page has an ID so that it can be uniquely identified. Now let's take a look at how you would create the cover page of our story. So remember, a story page is made up of multiple layers stacked back to front. And we saw these examples earlier. First, we have a layer containing a single AMP video for the background of our page. Then on top of that, we have a layer with the title, the byline, and the publication date of our story. And lastly, we opted to put a logo in the bottom right corner. And together, these make up the UI of our cover page. For each of the cities in this story, because remember, this is the 5 most expensive cities in the world, we have a page for each city, and those pages are constructed the same way. First, a layer for a video, and then on top of that, a layer with some text. But additionally, this page leverages some built-in features of stories that we find pretty exciting. So first, animations. Animations make the page more visually engaging. We use the animate in attribute to add a preset animation to this number 5 here, so that it flies in from the bottom as soon as the page is shown. Then, for the details of this city, we use sequencing in animations, which will fade in the details half a second after the number 5 flies in. So you can sort of chain and sequence these animations to create really engaging visual effects. This page also has background audio to help create an immersive experience. This plays audio in the background for the duration of the time that the user is on this page. You can also set this up to play audio in the background throughout the duration of the entire story. And lastly, we use a feature in stories that we call auto advance, which will automatically advance the user through the story without them having to manually tap on every screen. So here, we chain the advancement to the video playback so that as soon as the video has finished playing, the user will automatically be advanced to the next page. And we do this by specifying the ID of the video in the auto advance after attribute on the AMP Story page. So this, of course, is just the HTML markup. We can also write CSS to style our story. And this is actually the entirety of the CSS that is needed to build this story. It's perhaps a bit smaller given the templated nature of the story, but it's also smaller because much of the visual layout is handled by AMP itself. So here we just use the styles to set the text color of the story, adjust the fonts, tweak the alignment of our logo, which was in the bottom right corner, and add a gradient behind the text on the city pages. And last but not least, the bookend. As I mentioned earlier, you can customize the bookend. It's completely optional to customize it. There is a default. But if you choose to customize it, you can specify a JSON payload that looks something like this. It's broken into 2 main sections. First is sharing. there's the share providers object. Each of the sharing options comes from AMP Social Share, if you're familiar with that. So any sharing provider that is supported by AMP Social Share is also supported by the AMP Story bookend by simply using the provider type as a key. And the provider type usually matches the name of the platform, so Facebook for Facebook, Twitter for Twitter, and so forth. And if you want to enable the icon for that particular service, you can just add the value true. If you do need further customization, all of the parameters that allow you to parameterize sharing providers on AMP Social Share are also supported by AMP Story here by just specifying a sub-object like we did for Facebook here, specifying a custom application ID. You can also change the order of this, and that is respected as well to customize the order of your sharing icons in the bookend. The second main section of the AMP Story Bookend JSON is the related articles. And this is, again, how you can specify sort of onward journeys for your users. You can specify articles as an array here. Each of the articles itself is an object with a title, an image, and a URL to navigate to. And then you can also categorize these into sections. So you can see here that there's this section called More to Read that has an array of articles, and you can have as many such sections as you would like. So this is all specified as a single JSON payload that can be static or generated dynamically. And this allows the configuration to be easily reused across stories and also kept up to date if you wanted to generate this dynamically for related links, trending links, new links, or so forth. And that sums up how to build our simple example story. But obviously, you don't want to just create simple examples all day. So next, let's take a look at how you want to tell the stories that you want to tell and how to make them actually come to life. So to share more details on that, please help me welcome Elite Truong from Vox Media.
Great job. Hi, everyone. All right. When you want to know more about something right now, how do you do that? If you're like me and a billion of our other fellow humans, you would Google it. When I was a kid growing up in the small Midwestern town in the States, I read every story I gave my hands on. When I didn't have the right books or resources to learn something new, I could still search for anything that I wanted to learn more about by using Google. It's been the great equalizing platform to access information, no matter where you live. AMP was the first wave of prioritizing news stories in mobile search, and AMP Stories is the second. With AMP Stories, readers can search for what they want to learn more about now, whether it's Mardi Gras, which is today in the US, the Grammys, or to catch up with what's going on in the world, and reach trusted news sources right away, in a visual way, instead of just text. So hi, as John said earlier, I'm Elite Truong. I work at Vox Media, a media company that strives to build the future of journalism and entertainment through our 9 editorial networks that explore topics that people care about. I've been working closely with Google for the past several months to bring our audiences AMP stories, and was also Vox Media's product lead for the AMP project back in 2015. So what's so exciting about AMP stories for a publisher like us? Firstly, search is an important way for any reader to find our stories. From AMP, our readers are now used to finding us on mobile search right away, and we want to be able to reach them through visual stories on mobile search right away as well. This is a good opportunity to experiment with visual storytelling across platforms. These stories are short form, and nowadays it's much easier to catch up on what's going on with your favorite sports teams, live events, and things happening halfway across the world by tapping through a short visual story. These stories can travel across platforms, on our sites, on social, on other news feeds and platforms eventually. It's not limited to the third-party platform where it is produced, like similar stories, which means that it can reach more readers with less editorial effort. So today, I'm excited to announce the launches of 2 Vox Media networks on AMP Stories, Vox.com and SB Nation. The networks have different missions. SB Nation is a place for passionate sports fans, while Vox explains the news and what matters in the world. As two of our biggest networks on search, they both have incredibly talented visual storytelling teams who have pushed the boundaries of visual storytelling on Instagram, Snapchat, and interactive stories. They also both exist on Chorus, Vox Media's proprietary tech and data platform for growing digital media brands. For this launch, we chose a pair of newsrooms so they have a fellow team to learn from a different editorial approach and audience. So what do these stories actually look like? You've gotten a little preview before, but I want to show you these two examples now. From SB Nation, this is how college football rankings actually work, because they can be confusing. This is adapted from a very popular SB Nation article that explained rankings in a much more in-depth way, but it also works as a short explainer in this format. From Vox.com, is dark chocolate actually healthy? This was adapted from a hugely popular video that the Vox video team produced, which helps explain how dark chocolate came to be known as a health food. So, how do AMP stories fit into the way that we tell stories in general at Vox Media? There are two examples here as well. Our first is on SB Nation, 17776 is an ambitious multimedia narrative that imagines what football might look like 15,000 years into the future that took off. On averages, our audiences spent about 11 minutes with the story, which was written by John Boyce. For Vox.com, we have an illustrated deep dive into how living in poor neighborhoods impacts its residences, reported and built by Alvin Chang. As you can see from these examples, some of our visual stories are bespoke, hand-coded stories on platform or created on other proprietary platform CMSs like Instagram or Snapchat. From stories like these that served as our visual storytelling inspiration, we had to figure out how to transition from building our comprehensive hand-coded stories to creating a tool where we could more easily create and publish short visual AMP stories. So the solution for this? We built an MVP story builder within our CMS that's meant for designers and developers to help build stories based on editorial storyboards. And we did it within a few days. It's highly customizable per page, and so we can make sure the stories reflect the intended design and automatically publishes new stories to all the right places. Since it's so lightweight, we can add on what we need as we go along without much friction. And we'll use lessons from this story builder to incorporate into our larger publishing system in Chorus. The credit here goes to Greg McWilliam, who is our lead engineer on AMP Stories, who's also here at AmpConf. So there are a million ways to tell stories through images and text, we know as publishers. But in this format, we need to figure out what's most impactful and relevant, and tell it in a visually striking way that informs our readers. Since we're working collaboratively across product and editorial teams to produce stories in a new way, we established a new pitch to publish process for all of our AMP stories to track how they perform and help us chart future editorial plans for short-form visual stories. So after several months of thinking about and writing and building AMP stories, particularly in the context of what our readers would want to see, we have some lessons to share to set you up for success. Firstly, find the right people to work on AMP stories. The right people for us turned out to have a mix of social, video, and visual skills. We also learned really quickly that a team of people with those skills will push each other to make better stories rather than if just one person was in charge. Figure out how they should work together. If these people have never worked together before, which was the case for a lot of the publishers who were in the beta phase, you need help from people who are process experts. You can't just wing it and have it consistently work. Lastly, set realistic goals and expectations early on. This is a format that requires a lot of things to figure out: story adaptation, designating a dedicated team, and new editorial product and revenue strategies. Setting goals across teams early on will help set you up for success. A big reason for us to launch on AMP Stories is to push ourselves to improve visual stories across the board, teach our teams about producing daily stories outside of just video and text, and reach a much larger audience by doing that. It's a really exciting time to be here when we can marry search and storytelling in a way that my kid self would have been over the moon to read, and know that these stories are available to anyone, including kids in small towns anywhere who want to learn more about the world. Thanks very much. Back to Jon.
Thanks, Elite. So Vox Media was just one of many collaborators that helped us innovate in this space to bring you the story format that you see here today. And we'd like to definitely thank all of the folks that helped make this happen across the many organizations that were involved. So what's next for stories in AMP? We want to drive monetization by supporting ads and improving support for affiliate linking. Stories are currently focused on English, but we hope to expand that support more broadly as well. We would like to bring richer features and more interactive storytelling devices to aid you in telling your stories the way that you want them to be told. And we'd like for these stories to be seamlessly embeddable wherever they show up, with the right metadata, beautiful previews, and stellar performance. So for more about what's coming next for stories and for AMP more generally, check out Malta and Rudy's What's Next in AMP talk at the end of the day today. If you're interested in getting started with stories, check out ampproject.org/stories. On that site, you'll find more detailed documentation for what I went over today, a guided tutorial on building a story from start to finish, best practices on building your stories and how to keep them beautiful and performant, and examples for you to build from and to play around with. Like other experimental features in AMP, you can start playing with this today, but to actually publish these stories, you'll need to sign up for the AMP Story Origin trial, and details on that can also be found in the AMP Story documentation. Google Search has also been working to integrate this feature into the Google search results page. Existing visual stories can be found by querying the publisher's name using one of these queries seen here to see a carousel of their stories that they've created. This feature will be rolling out over the next few days, but if you want to try it out today, here, right now, for demo purposes, you can use the g.co/ampstories link that you see here. Thank you so much for your time. If you all have more details, for you to get more details, or if you have questions for us, feel free to stop by the publishing and monetization booth right here outside at AmpConf. Thank you.